Welcome to the Kroger Book Service Overview. During this short video, we'll give you the basics of a book service call for Kroger, but I want to emphasize a few things before we get started. You're going to need to access the FieldLink website to get what you need. You cannot do your service call without having the newsletter, the planograms, and any promotional information. Also be aware that how we merchandise the priority areas, meaning the book of the month, spinner, table, the bestsellers, the children's books, that presentation needs to be perfect upon leaving the store. Also, communication is very important with the receiver, with the department manager. Make sure that you are covering the department with them and letting them know of any promotions that are happening.
In preparation for your store visit, there's a few things that you want to do beforehand. One is accessing FieldLink TPS. So when you access FieldLink TPS, it's going to give you some other sections that you might have within your store. It's going to show you different coding. It'll tell you what planograms you need to print for your store specifically. A couple of those planograms might be your children's planogram, as well as any extra adult sections that you might have in your store. It will also have the option of you looking at some of the pictures of any displays that might come in that are book related. You can also access the FieldLink TPS and get a copy of your newsletter if you haven't gotten it yet. They do come in your totes for your magazine delivery. One key thing that you want to keep in mind before accessing FieldLink TPS is that there are Kroger-specific codes based on your division. You want to put that prefix code, it's a 2-digit number, before your store number in the FieldLink TPS. The reason for this is that Kroger will reuse the store numbers based on the divisions. Now that you've arrived at your store, you've already checked FieldLink, you've gotten your planograms, you have your newsletter, you're walking into the store, and one of the most important things you want to do is check in with your receiver as well as store personnel for your department. So in this case, within Kroger, you're going to check in with the drug GM personnel. When meeting with your receiver, you're going to want to make sure you're signing the vendor log, very important, as well as talk to the receiver about any new shipments that's come in and make sure that they've been checked in at this point in time. In the box in the new delivery, you're going to receive a couple things. One is going to be your store-specific return labels. You're also going to receive a bag that you're going to put all your return strip covers for your paperback books. You want to make sure you check in with your receiver to make sure that they didn't take those labels and that they did receive them if that's the case. You're now going to get all your product together. You're going to check for any displays that you might have based on your newsletter. It's going to tell you what your store is allowed to have based on your division. And you want to make sure you check in, when you're checking in with your drug GM manager, you want to make sure you mention the fact that you have a shipper that needs to be placed on the floor. This way they can start looking for a location for that shipper before you finish your service, so you're not wasting time later on in your service time. You're then going to bring your product out to the floor and start your work. Every Kroger division is going to have some type of Book of the Month fixture. Most of your stores are going to have a Book of the Month spinner, which on the first page of your newsletter is going to have the specific planogram that you follow for all 4 sides. In this example, we have the Book of the Month table. So on the Book of the Month table, you're going to make sure that you follow the first page of your newsletter, and it's going to have specific 6 titles that are called out to be on the table. So you want to make sure you set it similar to the way we have this one. You have them displayed nicely, and then you have a good backup stock of each one. When you're working the other sides of this fixture on the table, you want to make sure that you're setting one side to side 3 fixture of your Book of the Month spinner, and you want to do that on this side of the table. Your other 3 sides, you're going to make sure you're using the top 10 of your paperback bestsellers and or your top 10 of your hardback bestsellers. When working this, you want to pay close attention to these different labels that are on the top of the books. So on the top of this book right here, it says 30% off, and you can see the date. It only goes through 10/24 for this example. On the hardback bestsellers, you want to remove the top half of that label. On your paperback bestsellers, you're going to want to remove that entire label. And you want to make sure you do that before that date. You also want to pay close attention on your newsletter that there are a lot of do not display until dates. So those are street dates. Those are very specific. We cannot display a book until it's allowed to be on sale. So if you're in your store and it tells you the date is next week, hold that book in the back room for backstock and then place it on the Book of the Month spinner or table when you're working that product the next week. Now that we've completed working the Book of the Month fixtures, whether it's a spinner or a table, we're now going to work our way over to the inline bestseller section. Each store is different. Some of your stores might have a full 4-foot section for paperbacks bestsellers, as well as a full 4-foot section for your hardback bestsellers. For this store, in this example, we have what we call a combo section. It can either be paperbacks on the top or on the bottom, it all based upon your division. So for this example, the paperbacks are on the top. When working this section, you're going to refer to your newsletter, not Fielding TPS, for this planogram. So on this planogram, it's going to show that you have your top 20 for your paperback bestsellers. It also is going to list your top, your 21 to 40 paperback bestsellers. On your hardbacks, it's going to list your 1 through 15, which are your priorities, and then it's also going to give you the 16 through 30. When working this section, you don't have to really pay attention to these numbers per se. Some stores might not have them. But when working your section, if you need to expand out or shrink a section, just make sure you move those numbers as best you can if you do have those numbers. Obviously, you're going to start off in your top left-hand corner with Book of the Month or book bestseller number 1. A lot of times that might be your Book of the Month, but we want to make sure we start in the top left corner and work your way across. Just like you read a book, you want to make sure you follow that across. Your flow is always going to be the top to the bottom and then out. So in this case, we talked about the fact that the top 15, top 20, you want to make sure you're representing the best you can with the top 20. Your Book of the Month spinner or table takes priority, but you're going to make sure you fill this section. You never want to premature anything on the top list of bestsellers. So in this case, we have two sections of number 2, 2 facings of number 1, and we have a hole right here. So what we're going to do, instead of leaving that hole or keeping old product, we're going to flex over the book that's next to it. And you want to work across. We're going to do the same thing over here. When working this section, though, again, you're not paying attention specifically to numbers, so you're going to go, okay, here's number 1, 2, 3, go down through 20. Once you have all those facings up, if you're missing number 21, you're going to go ahead and skip to number 22. Do not leave a hole. Do not keep old product. Make sure you shift into the next level, next number. So you're just going to follow your numbers along. Same thing goes for the hardback bestsellers. You're going to work across, starting with the top left, and work your number 1, working across. If you need to double face anything to make sure all your product's out, shift these numbers over just like we talked about with the paperbacks. You want to make sure you represent as much as you can here, as well as make sure that your table or your spinner are full for your Book of the Month. Just like on the Book of the Month table we talked about, the labels, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to these expiration dates. While looking at these, most of the time you will have a shelf talker that you want to make sure you fold properly and put on the shelf. On that shelf talker, it will also show you the same date of expiration, so make sure when you're pulling the label, you pull those shelf talkers. The shelf talkers will come in your boxes, so you want to make sure that you put those on the shelf. They are mandated by ReaderLink to have them on the shelf. Now that we've completed the Book of the Month fixtures, as well as the hardback and paperback bestseller sections, we're now going to move on to the other sections of your store. The rest of these sections are going to be store-specific planograms, so make sure you have your you've accessed Fielding TPS and printed off your store-specific planograms for these sections. Right now, we're going to go ahead and work the children's section for this store. When working this section, you're going to make sure that you set this section exactly to the planogram. Do not keep old product, do not flex over anything, leave the holes for right now. So in this case, this goes here based on the planogram. As you're coming across, oh, this item does not belong in this planogram. So we're going to go ahead and take that item down and set it in our returns. Now you've worked through the product, you made sure that everything is new and fresh product. When we get down to the bottom shelf here, in this store, we happen to have 2 default sections. So down here, you're going to keep any movie tie-ins that are current, you're going to keep any promo items that are current, as well as maybe some product, like holiday product that might be in the store. In this case, we do have some Halloween product. So now that the whole store is set, or the section is set, we're now going to go and check for our holes. We must place reorders if you have 5 or more holes in the store. To place the reorders in more detail, you're going to find the instructions in Fielding TPS under the library for your chain. But some of the details that you're going to need there are you're going to have the planogram, and below the planogram on the website is going to have the text version with some item numbers. So what you're going to need in the email is you're going to need the item number for the book that you're missing, as well as making sure that you're putting the store number in the subject line. You're going to then email that over to fssupport@readerlink.com. You're going to make sure that it's very important to do this to copy your supervisors so they know that you've placed this order. Now that we've gotten everything ready to place the order, you're going to go ahead and flex over the current product making sure that there's no product that's not on the planogram here, and you're going to go ahead and flex this over to fill the holes so it looks full. You can see right here, we're going to flex this down and flex this over. Now, if you look at the section, it is worked 100%. It's all nice and clean, and we're going to move on to the next planogram section in your store. Earlier in this video, I talked about when checking in with store personnel to mention to them any out-of-department displays or promotional items that you might have. So that way they can find locations for you. One of the prime locations is where we're standing right now, which is the Halloween promo section. It's seasonal. It's going to switch with all the different seasons. So if we can get a display here, that's a very high traffic area. You want to build that rapport with the store so then that way you can get locations like this. For this example in this store, we did have the display, or the store did break down the display, so I do have some of the product. I'm going to go ahead and work that into the children's section in those default shelves. If this does happen in your store, you want to make sure you keep the product, use it as backstock, fill up the shelves, make sure we continue to try to sell through it. On your newsletter, it will tell you what the current on-sale displays are currently for your store. So you want to make sure that you're keeping the displays based upon that. You want to get rid of displays and return the items when they're no longer needed or they're no longer valid for the store, so then that way you can keep new and improved displays always on sale. On the newsletter, it tells you the on-sale date, and it does state in here that if you have 2 or more of these displays, keep the most current one, which is whatever the holiday is, and maybe one other one, and get rid of the other ones. If they'll allow you to keep the rest of the displays, keep them as long as you possibly can, making sure that you're merchandising them while you're doing your services week after week, whether they're up for a month or 2 months or however long. Make sure you're merchandising them and cleaning them and keeping them up to date. Now that we've worked the Book of the Month fixture, we've worked the hardback bestsellers and the paperback bestsellers, we've worked any other 4-foot sections that you have, in this case just a children's section, we're now going to process our returns. So when you first checked in with the store, you received your box of product, you received your envelope for your paperback bestseller or paperback covers, as well as you returned your store-specific labels, return labels. So now we're going to go ahead and process the returns. So for all paperback books, we make sure we strip the covers. You stick them in this envelope, and you set it aside for you to put on the top of the return box. So we're going to go ahead and return the whole copy of your hardback bestsellers. We're going to return the whole copy of the tradeback books, and then we're going to return whole copies of any children's product that's no longer on planogram. We're going to go ahead and throw the envelope with the paperback covers in it into the box, and you're going to bring this with your store-specific return labels to your receiver in the back room for them to process the rest of the return.